Hello everybody. In today's video, I'll be covering the Nissan Y50 platform. That is the 2006 through 2010 Infiniti M35 and M45. In this video, we'll be talking about wheels and tires, and I like the OEM Plus approach. So here we've got other Nissan and Infiniti wheels that we'll be testing on the M45. This is a 2008 M45 Sport. So first thing is, we've got the factory sport wheels, and these were 19 inches in diameter, 8.5 inches wide with an offset of 50. The OEM tire was 245 4019, but I believe here we have 245 4519. Still, I think it's close enough to give you a visual on what it looks like. It's a little more meat than there was originally, which sometimes is not such a bad thing. So I just wanted to let you know what it looks like from the factory, and then we'll bring in other tires, other wheels and other tires to talk about how those fit. At the end of the day, this is not only a wheel fitment video, but we're going to do a little discussion. We're going to cover a little bit about tires as well, because that is a 245. This one here, this is a Nissan GTR wheel, 255. This is an Infiniti Q70 Sport Wheel, those right there. That's a 245, but then it's not exactly the same, because this is not only a wider wheel, but the offset is slightly different. So we're going to test that one as well, see what it looks like. This is also a GTR wheel, but it's got 285 wide tire on it. So these two are going to fit a little differently, but the purpose of this video today is to show what kinds of combinations can you use on your Infiniti M45 or M35. Specifically, if you have stock suspension like we do, stock ride height. I know we'll be making some changes in the near future, but for now, this is what things look like, okay? So we've already seen what this looks like right now. I'm going to show what factory fitment is, how much clearance you get to the interior components, things like the steering knuckle and the shock in the rear, and then we'll test these other wheels as well. Okay, let's look at the fitment with the OEM 19-inch wheels. So one thing I want to remind you though is that these tires are not the original size for these vehicles. The OEM sport tire was 245 4019, but a lot of people, I think one of the biggest reasons to get a different tire size was availability. 245 4519 was more common, and in fact in the Infiniti family you can get that tire size with the Infiniti EX35s, EX37s, QX50, whatever they ended up being called. But I think for the sake of comparison, the speedometer and accuracy is not that terrible, and for fitment purposes it's still a 245 tire, so it's going to get us close enough to give us a visual of what it's going to look like. Let's get in there. So that's how close it looks like from the factory, and you'd reckon that if this close was safe enough for a manufacturer, if you make any modifications and get just as close, it should not be any problem, right? Then look at the clearance over here as well. Okay, everything's nice and cool, no clearance issues. And by the way, I should mention this, every other tire that I'm going to show after this one here is going to be wrong size for this, but we're just trying to work on the series, on the width. That's what I'm working on today, along with my other jobs. Clearance is really good in the back, no concerns at all. Never is. When it comes to OEM Plus modifications, one of the most common, or one of the more intuitive upgrades people usually do, is get the Q70 or M56 Sport Wheels. These ones right here. They are slightly different in spec to the 19-inch Sport Wheels. For one, these are 20 inches. The widths are 9 inches versus 8.5, with an offset of 43 versus 50. So when you install these wheels, it's like using a half an inch spacer. So your wheel and tire are going to be moved out half an inch compared to the other one. And I think I've said this is about a perfect spec for these cars because it's just flush. I've talked about it in different videos and we're going to show it right now. The tire sizes here right now are M56 tires, M56 Sport tires, so just keep that in mind. They're not as meaty if you use the right size. We usually use 250. We like using 255, 35, 20 to match the speedometer a little better. But look at it. Not too aggressive, it's just right. So I think, dare I say that these wheels usually end up looking better on the M45 than they would, and the M35, than sometimes they do on those cars, the original vehicles. But the crazy thing about these wheels is that they look good on very many different vehicles. We've tried them on Q50s, I've seen them on EX37s, I've seen them on FXs. It's crazy, but I think they look better on sedans. Let's talk about fitment. We already mentioned offset and what that does to a wheel, right? Therefore, we do not expect any clearance issues inside here. When you look at the steering knuckle, all clear, all good. And the top of the knuckle has no concerns either, although we did mention that this tire is a little taller, just slightly taller than stock. And if you had a properly spec'd tire, you would have even more clearance over there. But again, not a big concern today. Let's look at the back. Just like the front, lower offset means more clearance. Although the wheel is a little wider, and it's still a 245 tire, but the wheel is a little wider, so it kind of brings it back towards the shock. But again, no real concerns with space. We're not really fighting for space over here. And these are Nissan GTR Black Edition wheels, all fronts. That means the spec on the wheels is 20 inches in diameter, 9.5 wide with an offset of 45. The tires on these though are 285, 35, 20, so they are quite wide, and this is what it looks like from the side. I'm gonna go to the back. They poke very evidently, but again, that is, to some people, that's an ideal look. Can be corrected with a little bit of camber, but at this point the choice is yours. All right, and let's see the clearance with this. Pretty tight, but it clears. Clear is clear. So one thing I'd like to remind the viewers is that this tire size is not the correct tire size for the M45. This tire size, it's actually really wide, 285, 35. This is more practical for the M56. Looking at the back, lots of clearance, no problems at all. I wasn't really expecting much of an issue, but remember that the OEM wheels are 19, 8.5 with an offset of 50. So once you get 45 offset, it already jumps you out 5 millimeter. It's like using a 5 millimeter spacer. Yeah, it's wider, it's a whole inch wider, but it's not going to be too bad. So that's what fitment looks like. On to the next one. These are Nissan GTR CBA wheels. The spec is like it is for most GTR front wheels, 20 by 9.5 with an offset of 45. The tires on there right now are original GTR tire sizes for the fronts, 255, 40, 20. See how well it's executed. Yeah, the offset of 45 and the 9.5 does poke out a little bit, but it's not too aggressive. You can still see a little bit of tread, but not too badly. that's it. I'll tell you one thing though, as mild as these look, I've had the experience of riding with 255s on GTR wheels, stock suspension on an M45, and in the back I could feel it throwing rocks into the body. So it's just something to pay attention to, something to keep in mind. If you're going to lower your suspension or get some camber arms, maybe you might not have the same problem I did, but I just figured it's something I should let you know while I'm showing you all these different things you could do with your vehicle. So, all right, let's talk about clearance. Clears pretty well. No real concerns, just guess the only concern here would be the 45 offset isn't too bad compared to the 50 of the original wheels. However, depending on how wide you go, these are 9.5. If you went to 10, you'd be getting closer and closer to the steering knuckle. Or if you got wider tires, wider than 255. But some people usually get wider wheels and stretch tires, so they still make it work. Just something to think about. But 255 seems safe. In the back, lots of clearance. No concerns in the back. So if you were able to get yourself a staggered set that the back was wider, but somehow play with it in that your extra width was going inside, you'd be safe. Just don't get something with too aggressive an offset and end up sticking too far out if you don't want to. If you want to, well, more power to you. All right, for a surprise entrant, we have blank edition wheels, yeah, but those are rear wheels. The spec on that is 20, 10.5 wide with an offset of 25. People like these offsets. Some people say the front wheels have weak offsets. This is what people like. Some people. Look at that. A reminder, this is stock suspension. It is, worn. The vehicle's got 160,000 miles, give or take. So the way it sits here might look a little different if you have them on your car. But I think most people who go with such an aggressive offset usually have suspension work done as well. But hope this gives you some sort of a visual as to what it could look like. Wow. So in a strange way, aggressive numbers and all that, but because of how wide that looks, I think blank edition wheels already look smaller than 20s because of that lip. Kind of makes the wheel profile disappear a little bit. But then when you have the rear wheels, as aggressive as they are, it ends up looking stocky and looks kind of small. They look like 18s, 19s to me, even more so than the fronts would look. But here we're showing experiments. Just have you look at everything, see what kind of look you like. So let's go ahead, put it in the air and look at fitment. When it comes to fitment, well, you might be surprised, but let's look. Despite all the numbers, I didn't even mention this, but the rear wheel is 10.5 in width, 25 offset, but then they went a little extra, and they have 295 35 20s. These are wide, so look at the back. Despite this the wider tires, it seems like you get even more clearance than the front wheel that had 285. Well, the reason is the offset being lower, much lower, 25 versus 45. It's like having a 20 millimeter spacer, so it pushes it out that much more. If this was a 45 offset wheel and you had the same tire, you'd definitely be rubbing. But yeah, because of that, look at the clearance. And what's funny, I usually say this, is that the steering knuckle, the top of the steering knuckle is never a concern at all. Look at all that. You can clear it by a mile, give or take. Let's look at the back. We already know what to expect here, don't we? Lots of clearance. No concerns in the back at all. All right, there you go. I hope this videos like this, although not all glorious in their execution, I hope they still give enough information to educate you on what wheel specs could work for your car, especially if you have stock suspension like we do over here.